The gunshot echoed across the Montana Valley, sharp and sudden against the wide, open sky. Jacob Brennan's heart jumped as he saw his older brother Daniel thrown violently from his horse. Dust swirled around him, and jagged rocks tore into Daniel's side, blood seeping through his shirt. "Jake, help me get to the cabin," Daniel gasped, his voice trembling with pain. Jacob spurred his horse forward, panic twisting his chest. They had been moving cattle to better grazing land, and now the unexpected accident had left Daniel hurt, far from home. The year was 1867, and the rugged Montana wilderness offered no doctor close enough to save him if his injuries worsened. Jacob gritted his teeth as he hoisted his brother onto his horse, every second a torment. "Catherine got to get home to Catherine," Daniel whispered weakly. Jacob nodded, but a chill settled over him at the mention of his brother's wife. Catherine, a mail-order bride from Baltimore, had arrived only 8 months earlier. She was pale and delicate-looking, a city girl thrust into the harsh, unyielding frontier. Jacob had spoken barely 20 words to her since her arrival, keeping his distance out of respect, and perhaps something he wasn't ready to name. The cabin appeared ahead, a weathered silhouette against the heat shimmer. Smoke drifted lazily from the chimney, and through the window, Jacob could see Catherine moving. She wore a simple blue dress, and for a moment, she looked like a piece of sky fallen to earth. "Catherine!" Jacob called, as he half-carried Daniel inside. "We need hot water and clean cloths, quickly!" Her eyes widened at the sight of Daniel's injuries, but she did not scream or falter. Instead, she moved with swift, sure steps, helping Jacob lay Daniel on the bed. "What happened?" she asked, her voice calm despite the fear Jacob could see etched in her face. "The horse went down, Daniel got thrown," Jacob said, stripping away his brother's torn shirt to reveal deep cuts along his ribs. He forced a steady tone, but his stomach knotted as he saw the truth reflected in Daniel's gray, strained face. Catherine worked silently, her hands steady as she cleaned the wounds. Jacob watched, astonished by her skill. "Where'd you learn to do this?" he asked. "My mother was a midwife," she replied softly. "She taught me the basics before she died." Her focus never wavered as she tended Daniel. Jacob found himself captivated by her quiet competence, wondering what had driven this young woman to leave everything she knew for a life so far from home. For 3 days, Catherine cared for Daniel while Jacob worked tirelessly on the ranch, managing cattle, mending fences, and tending the garden. Yet every spare moment, he checked on Daniel, and his curiosity about Catherine grew. On the second evening, he asked, "How do you know what to do?" "Experience and attention," she said simply, adjusting a bandage by lamplight. Jacob noticed how her hands moved with both gentleness and certainty. By the 4th day, Daniel's fever broke, but a shadow lingered in his eyes. He looked fragile, like a man already seeing his own end. "Jake," he whispered one evening, gripping Jacob's wrist with surprising strength. "Promise me something. Take care of Catherine, marry her if you must." Jacob recoiled internally at the thought. His brother's wife, a stranger he barely knew. How could he consider such a thing? "Daniel, I can't. She deserves better than a marriage of duty," he protested. Daniel's voice, though weak, carried iron. "She deserves to live, Jake. Promise me you'll protect her. Don't let her go back to Baltimore with nothing." Jacob's chest tightened. The words weighed on him like stone. Catherine, singing softly to the chickens outside. Her voice drifting through the cabin window made something ache in his chest that he could not name. "I promise," he finally said. The words felt foreign, heavy, and binding. Daniel relaxed for the first time in days, a faint, grateful smile crossing his face. But as the sun set over the Montana plains, Jacob knew that promise would change everything. He was committing to a life he hadn't chosen, with a woman he didn't yet understand. Outside, Catherine's song floated on the evening breeze, unaware that her fate and her heart would soon intertwine with his forever. The valley stretched wide and golden, beautiful, yet unforgiving. And in the quiet cabin, a reluctant bond began. forged not by love at first sight, but by duty, loyalty, and the unspoken hope that perhaps, from this impossible promise, something real could grow. The day of Daniel's funeral was gray and cold. Jacob stood beside the open grave, dirt still clinging to his boots, the rough Montana earth smelling faintly of rain and sorrow. Catherine was there too, wearing a borrowed black dress, her dark eyes steady but haunted. She hadn't cried during the service, hadn't made a sound, as they lowered Daniel into the ground. Jacob watched her, admiring her composure but worried about the storm of grief that must rage within. The town of Millbrook whispered behind their backs. "Poor girl, married less than a year," Mrs. Patterson muttered to her companion. "And already a widow. What will she do now?" Jacob tightened his jaw. Let them talk, he thought. Their lives were theirs to decide, not the town's. After the funeral, in the quiet of the cabin, Catherine faced Jacob with calm determination. "We should talk," she said softly, "about what comes next." Jacob's heart raced. The moment he had dreaded was here. The day Daniel's dying wish would become his reality. He looked at Catherine, realizing how little he truly knew her. Yet in the past week he had watched her strength, her intelligence, and her courage. They discussed the options carefully. Jacob could help her return to Baltimore, but it would leave her penniless and alone. Staying meant honoring his promise, marrying her to protect her from the harsh world they lived in. Slowly, they worked through the terms. Partnership first, help with the ranch, shared responsibilities, respect for each other's choice. Intimacy, love, children, those would come only as they both chose. Catherine studied Jacob's face, seeing honesty and a quiet longing she had not expected. "Then we understand each other," she said, extending her hand. "Partners." Jacob took her hand, feeling the small, soft warmth of hers against his calloused palm. "Partners," he echoed. The next morning, they rode to Millbrook for their second wedding in less than a year. The church was nearly empty, except for a few curious townsfolk who whispered at the sight of the young widow marrying her late husband's brother. The ceremony was brief and mechanical, yet determined. Jacob's lips brushed hers in a kiss that carried no warmth yet bound them legally and morally. They returned home with a sense of uneasy partnership, a fragile beginning built on duty and trust. But peace was fleeting. Soon, trouble arrived at their doorstep in the form of Marshal Tom Crawford, a cold, calculating man with territorial authority. He accused Daniel of selling stolen cattle, claiming the debt now belonged to Jacob and Catherine. The amount was staggering, far beyond what their ranch could cover. Jacob's blood boiled, but the law was in Crawford's hands, and resistance was dangerous. Crawford offered them a grim bargain: work off the debt on his employer's land, bound by loyalty and long hours, the slightest misstep threatening punishment. Their barn burned that night, conveniently leaving them without shelter or supplies, forcing them further into dependence. Yet through the chaos, Jacob and Catherine found strength in each other. They faced the fire together, rescued the horses, and prepared for the long, grueling work ahead. The days became relentless. Jacob labored from sunrise to sunset, breaking horses and tending fences, while Catherine managed the household and assisted with provisions, her hands blistered and raw. The other ranch workers whispered and watched, the system designed to keep them compliant and fearful. Yet even in this harsh world, they discovered a growing bond. Jacob's protective instincts surged every time danger arose, and Catherine's courage shone through, her intelligence guiding them through impossible situations. At night, in the flickering candlelight, Catherine learned the truth behind Daniel's dealings. Crawford had been manipulating him, using the ranch as a front for his own criminal enterprise. The realization made their predicament even more dangerous, but it also gave them purpose. They were no longer simply surviving. They were planning, strategizing, and waiting for the moment to reclaim justice. The tension grew as Crawford's men monitored their every move, the threat of violence ever present. Catherine's discovery of the hidden ledger and her courage to confront Crawford put her life at risk. But Jacob was always there, ready to intervene. Their partnership evolved into something deeper, forged in danger, and the shared responsibility of survival. By the time they were forced to work for the Rocking W Ranch to pay off the debt, they had become a team. Jacob handled the grueling outdoor labor, while Catherine managed tasks inside the main house, enduring the hostility of the staff and foreman. Each day tested their patience, their endurance, and their loyalty to each other. Yet they clung to the belief that together they could survive anything. Even as they endured exhaustion, humiliation, and the looming threat of Crawford, Jacob and Catherine's respect and reliance on each other grew. The practical partnership slowly began to bloom into something more, a bond of trust, understanding, and the faint stirrings of love, born not from desire, but from shared struggle and unwavering loyalty. The Montana plains stretched wide around them, harsh and unforgiving. But within the walls of the cabin and the fence lines of the ranch, Jacob and Catherine began to carve out a life together. A life built on promise, courage, and the unspoken hope that the trials they faced would one day give way to something lasting and true. The night was silent, except for the distant howl of a coyote. Jacob and Catherine moved carefully through the cabin, every shadow a potential threat. The ledger, proof of Crawford's crimes, was hidden beneath Catherine's cloak. They had survived the fire, the threats, and the grueling work at the Rocking W Ranch, but the final confrontation loomed. Crawford had underestimated them. He had assumed fear would break them, that debt and danger would keep them compliant. But he had never faced someone like Catherine, someone brave enough to risk her life for truth. And Jacob, a man whose love had grown from duty into something fierce and protective. At the crack of dawn, they made their move. Jacob confronted Crawford at the ranch, a silent storm in his eyes. Catherine stood behind him, ledger in hand, the evidence of Crawford's deceit ready to expose him. "It's over," Jacob said simply, his voice carrying across the corral. Crawford laughed, but it was nervous, brittle. The trial in Helena was swift once the ledger and eyewitness testimonies were presented. Catherine's calm and precise account, Jacob's steady support, and the witnesses who had suffered under Crawford's rule painted a picture impossible to deny. Judge Morrison listened intently, his reputation for fairness giving them hope. When the verdict was read, Jacob pulled Catherine close, disbelief and relief washing over him. Crawford's crimes were exposed, his authority stripped, and Daniel's name cleared. The debts were nullified, and justice was served. For the first time in months, Jacob and Catherine felt the weight of fear lift from their shoulders. Outside the courthouse, Montana's wide sky stretched before them, vast and free. Catherine looked up, her dark eyes reflecting the morning sun. "What now?" she asked softly, a hint of a smile playing on her lips. Jacob took her hand, the warmth of her fingers a comfort and a promise. "Now we go home," he said, voice full of hope. "Home to our ranch, to our life." And for the first time it was truly theirs. The road ahead would have challenges, as all lives did, but together they had faced fire, danger, and despair, and emerged stronger. The bond that began as a promise to a dying man had transformed into a love both fierce and tender. As they rode back across the plains, hand in hand, the wind in their hair and the sun lighting their path, Jacob realized something he hadn't expected. Daniel's dying wish had given them more than protection, more than duty. It had given them each other, and that was worth more than all the gold in Montana territory. The cabin, the cattle, the wide-open valley, they were just the beginning. Together, they would build a life filled with trust, courage, and love. A life chosen, not imposed. A life that would last a lifetime.